Please, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, thank you very much for being here. It's a big honor for me to be here to talk to those who have actually been doing the project. We've just been providing funding, and of course, my colleagues have tried to help shaping it. I think the fact that this is this afternoon the only, if I understand it well, geographic session in a whole set of horizontal sessions and discussions shows already the importance of what we are going to talk about. That has, of course, a strong regional dimension because the countries which are going to present their work have themselves been, and especially Albania and Montenegro, in 2022, the target of cyber attacks of, in some cases, unprecedented, even at a global level, size. In the European Commission, when asked to come in support of these countries, we tried to very quickly mobilize some of our instruments which we have available for targeted and fast reaction, and we designed, together with the partners, a project called Cybersecurity Rapid Response for Albania, Montenegro, and North Macedonia. Now, this is a stream of funding that we are using very often in crisis context. But you always depend on having a good partner. And I must say, in this case, we were happy to see that the Estonian e-governance academy was available and interested in the implementation, because here we have a partner with whom we've been working in other highly problematic and challenging contexts and have very, very trustful and good cooperation. That helped us to do what is really important in such a situation, to be as fast as a public administration, with all the apologies, can be. The approach that has guided our project from the beginning was one where we really tried with the partners together to identify the respective needs, which were not always the same across the countries. The challenges look identical, but in each of the countries you have a different governance, legal, specific other situation, specific need, and that's what we tried to address. The project tried to address, I mentioned it quickly, but also very targeted, the main issues. And this included, by the way, also that we did not only provide hands-on support and training, etc., but also equipment material, which is also not always the easiest in such situations to do that rapidly. And we're very grateful for all the participants that we managed to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, there's very often in these discussions the question, but what's the public sector role in that, and what are you doing here, and why are you having to intervene? And I think the last few years particularly have demonstrated how crucial it is. The countries that are going to discuss and present the cases for sure, but you also know what happened in Ukraine, what happened in other parts of the Western Balkan, what happened in some member states over the last 5, 10, 12 years. And that is something that is not just protecting and working on public infrastructure, on administrations, but also understanding that this protection is at the same time a protection and necessary for critical infrastructure that our industries need. My personal involvement that I found the most interesting in that respect in the last 5 years, having worked on Ukraine and a number of other challenges, was, by the way, during the COVID crisis, where we saw vaccine producers that got under enormous attacks, something that was not really a topic of discussions, and fortunately they all got well through that. So we have, as a European Union, and Commissioner Breton made this point also this morning, we have a strong track record in working with also the public and the private sector in providing legislation and working on the whole range of issues. What we did, and that's where I try to not preempt too much what probably the speakers afterwards will say, is we tried to really support hands-on our partners in tackling the challenges. And here we had a big advantage that the countries we were working with, as I said, North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Albania, are very well-established partners for us, partners with whom we had already before a quite trustworthy relationship, and who had in the respective countries a very high level of engagement and of committed colleagues working on the topics. And this is, if you look at the broader picture, this is why you really see a kind of a seamless success story there, despite all the heavy hits that were taken, that go from, let's say, high-level political declarations between the EU and the Western Balkans to the very close technical cooperation at working level between the experts, and that helped us to really cover all the elements that were needed. The technical agencies, the ministries in charge of cybersecurity were our main interlocutors, but our approach is always in such cases all government encompassing. Because you need, for example, very often legislation, the right regulatory framework, and that is not only one ministry that can provide it, and you have to go further. But you also have to start looking together with the public administrations in the countries, as I mentioned it already, critical infrastructure, telecommunications, energy, financial transactions, etc. All these institutions have to be able to communicate, to interact also in times of crisis and of attacks. I also would like to mention here two more parts that are often overlooked as side aspects. So at the same time, they're looked at individual level very much. The first one is elections. Very often in this context of what we are doing here, we are preparing the ground for ensuring that in the countries under attack, in the medium, longer term, credible elections can still be held. An election is not something that happens on election days and then you have to make sure that some computers and some networks function. It is something that is much wider, that is much more encompassing. And in Montenegro this year, in the context of the presidential and national legislative elections, the project supported in the end then really the Ministry of the Public Administration, but also the Ministry of the Interior and the Foreign Affairs Ministry to manage all these threats that were happening, by the way, in reality. There's the second part, as I said, something that is sometimes forgotten when we talk cyber. Cyber is very often going hand in hand with disinformation, manipulation of information threats. That as well, I think we could observe in the countries. That's something that we can observe elsewhere. And Merle and I, we met for the first time when such a topic was rolled out by the EGA colleagues in Ukraine. In a pre-war context, but already in the context of enormous pressure and high level of threats. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, the cybersecurity has become increasingly an area of competition, of vulnerability really at a strategic level. It's not just about the functioning of one government process, it's the question of governance as a whole in a country that can be at stake. And it is, of course, something that is in the multinational, increasingly connected, interconnected world, also of a global importance, how things are going. Therefore, I think today, where each and every conflict we are having has a cyber component, it is important, and I'm very grateful that we can exchange here with people who have gone through that work, not in a theoretical manner, but really in real life, sometimes under real threats, under real attacks. And I therefore wish us all that we learn a lot for future program generations, be it with these countries, be it elsewhere in the world. Because there's one case, the service that I'm heading is globally active, that I am telling everybody at the moment when I'm running around and begging for money, and that is the topics of cybercrime, cyber attack, and the topic of disinformation is coming as a request for support from each and every EU ambassador that is contacting us from wherever in the world. It's in Asia, it's in Central Asia, it's in Europe, it's in the wider Europe, it's in Africa, of course, it's across the world. Thank you very much.